Welcome back in. Welcome back in. We're on to week 14 after a wild Sunday night football game, but I digress. We are here to talk about the week 14 waivers. We do have four teams on bye this week with the Patriots, 49ers, Panthers, and Giants, all the last four teams to go on bye before the fantasy playoffs start. So, that being said, let's get straight to it and let's talk about some of our top streaming options at the quarterback position. And they are as follows. We're going to start with Tyrod Taylor. Now Ty God completed 19 of 33 passes for 172 yards and a touchdown. He also rushed 8 times for 44 yards and another touchdown for 21 fantasy points against the Falcons. Taylor's averaged 19 fantasy points over his last 6 starts. Taylor's also averaging 240 passing yards, and which is a massive improvement over Justin Fields, who was averaging just 140 passing yards per game this year. He's also averaging 38 rushing yards per game over that same span. Next up for the Jets, though, is a very favorable matchup against the Dolphins, who have the ninth most scheduled adjusted fantasy points to quarterback. So Tyrod Taylor is one of my favorite streaming options of the week. Let's get moving here. Let's move over to Trevor Lawrence. Playing Trevor Lawrence is never really a fun experience, but he's starting to put up things together. Today against the Titans, he completed 16 of 27 passes for 229 yards and 2 scores. He also rushed an additional 3 times for 25 yards for 21 fantasy points. He's now posted 20 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 games, which is top 12 among quarterbacks. Next up is a matchup against the Colts, who have allowed the 13th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Next up is going to be Sam Darnold. He's rostered in 52% of leagues. Now, this is extremely volatile, but this is an extremely volatile play. Now, he's been super efficient this year. But today against the Vikings, Darnold completed just 14 of 26 for 128 yards. The Seahawks leaned heavily on their rushing attack and their defense to get things done as they won 26-0. Darnold has now scored 8 or fewer fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. So why play Darnold? I think simply put, it's just the matchup is too good. The Seahawks travel to Atlanta to take on a Falcons defense that allows the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 5 games. So listen, there's a lot of volatility when it comes to Sam Darnold. They typically lean on the run. They don't ask him to throw the ball as much. And if they can get away with just leaning on their defense and running the ball, they will not ask Sam Darnold to do as much. But Sam Darnold does have some breakout games, have some big games in his bag. But there's volatility here, and I do want people to understand that. Lastly, C.J. Stroud has actually played much better recently. Today he didn't score any touchdowns, but still threw for 276 yards in that game. And prior to this, like he's been posting pretty solid numbers over his last 5 or 6 starts, averaging about 20 fantasy points per game. Now, this is a tough matchup on the road, Sunday night football game against the Kansas City Chiefs. So that should be mentioned, but still probably a matchup where they're going to have to score some points here. So CJ Stroud, I think, is also an option. And then Shedeur Sanders, I put him on here mainly because this is a matchup against the Titans coming up where, one, they're probably going to be favored, and maybe they throw the ball a little bit more. You would have to be extremely desperate in week 14 to be streaming Shedeur Sanders, but the matchup is not a bad one. Let's keep moving here. Let's move over to the running backs, and we are going to start with a couple options here. I don't think there's anything crazy that's happened this week. No big injuries really to speak of that have come out of week 13. But Keaton Mitchell, I think, is somebody that we want to talk about. Mitchell didn't have a huge role. Finished with just 5 total opportunities. He turned that into 31 yards and a score for 10 fantasy points. Obviously not a huge role, but Mitchell is one of the most explosive running backs in the league and score anytime he is on the field and the ball is in his hands. He should continue to see a larger workload with Justice Hill on IR. Mitchell should see 6 to 8 touches per game and is now 1 injury away from being a huge fantasy asset. Mitchell should be added in all 12-team leagues. And then Chris Rodriguez, only rostered in 24% of leagues. Rodriguez rushed 11 times tonight for 41 yards and a score for 10 PPR points against a very good Broncos run defense. He was the leading rusher with 11 attempts to 6 for Jerry McNichols and then 4 for JCM. He's now scored a touchdown in 4 of his last 6 games. Now, after this matchup, things really open up for this rushing attack for the Commanders as they will get favorable matchups against the Vikings, Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys to close out the season. There's definitely some spots in here where I think you can look to play him. He's certainly worth an add in all 12-team leagues as he will be an RB3 on most weeks, but even maybe a low-end RB2 against the Giants in a few weeks, who have the worst run defense in the league. Because I'll say, every time Chris Rodriguez touches the ball, he's been pretty productive. Even tonight against the Broncos, he looked pretty good. they just kind of went away from him. They started falling behind a little bit. They had to throw the ball at a much higher rate. So, and I also should mention Jaden Daniels should be back this upcoming matchup here against the Vikings as well. So Chris Rodriguez is definitely somebody. I don't know why he's only rostered 24% of leagues. He's basically been this team's lead back for the last couple of weeks. I don't really understand why he's so widely available. So keep moving. We're talking about a handcuff. First, I want to talk really is Blake Corum. Corum continues to eat into Kyron Williams' workload today against the Panthers. Corum rushed 7 times for 81 yards and a score for 14 PPR points. This was his best game of the season. I'm actually surprised he's only rostered in 16% of leagues. He doesn't offer a ton of standalone value because he's not involved in the passing game. But as today's game showed, with Kyron Williams left with an ankle injury, Corum would be a league winner if Williams was forced to miss time. Now, Williams did end up coming back into the game, but this is a reminder to add Corum before something does happen. Because if he does, Blake Corum will easily be the top waiver out of the week. Everybody will be trying to get him. He should not be available in this amount of leagues. And then lastly, all the rest of the guys are kind of the same thing we kind of talked about last week if you were here. This is mainly, guys who definitely should be rostered everywhere, which are handcuffs. A lot of these guys aren't actually available, but if they were, they should not be on any waiver wire. And then you also have deeper league formats where you're getting much deeper into the weeds here on some of these plays that are sitting out here. So let's move over to the wide receivers because I feel like that's really where we need to discuss. That is where some of the higher priority stuff is going to come from this week. First is Christian Watson. I put him on here. He's rostered in just 51% of leagues. I typically try to talk about players that are 50% and below, but still 51%, still widely available. He caught 4 of 10 targets for 80 yards and a score for 18 PPR points. Watson continues to look like the Packers' best wide receiver. He's now been targeted 23 times over his last 3 games and has scored 18 or more fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games as well. Next up is a huge matchup against the Bears. The Bears have allowed the 7th most PPR points to wide receivers this season. Watson is a priority add in 10 and 12-team leagues. Next up is going to be Jaden Higgins. We have discussed Jaden Higgins for a few weeks, but he is rostered in just 35% of leagues. Higgins has now racked up 28 targets over his last 4 weeks, is averaging 12 fantasy points per game, making him a viable wide receiver 3 moving forward. Houston also has a very favorable schedule for wide receivers moving forward with matchups against the Chiefs, Cardinals, Raiders, and Chargers over the remaining 4 games. So Jaden Higgins definitely is one of my favorite ads of the week. Next up is going to be A.D. Mitchell, rostered only 2% of leagues. And finally, after leading the team in target per route run rate over the last 3 weeks, Mitchell finally put together a big game with Tyrod Taylor. Mitchell hauled in 8 of 12 targets for 102 yards and a score for 24 PPR points against the Falcons. While you could view this as a little bit fluky, we have seen Mitchell receive 25 targets over the last 3 games, and the Jets actually have the 6th easiest remaining schedule for wide receivers with matchups against the Dolphins, Jaguars, Saints, and Patriots to close out the season. Mitchell has the talent, but has been the drops and the boneheaded decisions that have cost him playing time. Mitchell, though, is worthy in all 12-team leagues and above, definitely as an ad, because there's going to be a lot of opportunity here. Tyrod Taylor can actually throw the football down the field, and I think there's going to be a lot of good things coming. And I think A.D. Mitchell, at the very least, it should be at least viewed as a flex play with some of these matchups they have coming forward. Next up is going to be Devon Vele. Now, this time of the year, we are looking for anyone who's seeing opportunities, especially a wide receiver where we've seen so many injuries this year. Devon Vele checks that box today against the Dolphins. Vele was targeted 8 times. He secured all 8 for 93 yards and a touchdown for 23 PPR points. We have now seen Vele earn 15 targets over the last 2 weeks, making him at least worth a look in 12-team leagues. Like, I wouldn't go crazy, but I will say that he's at least worth a look, especially in 12-team leagues, because he is being targeted at a really high rate. The Saints throw the ball at one of the higher rates of the league and one of the more fast-paced offenses as well. So Vele is definitely worth a look. And the next up is going to be Jalen Coker. Coker put together his best day of the season today against the Rams. He secured 4 of 6 targets for 74 yards and a touchdown for 17 PPR points. First thing, the Panthers are going on bye, so he's not usable next week. But Coker has talent and was receiving a ton of hype in the preseason before suffering an injury that cost him the first 6 weeks of the season. Coker's probably a little bit thinner considering the bye week, but in deeper formats, Coker, I think, is at least worth a bench spot. Now, a couple other plays I want to talk about, a little bit more deeper league type stuff. At first is going to be John Mechie. It was a rough day for John Mechie, catching 4 passes for just 19 yards. Even more frustrating, though, is he dropped a would-be touchdown in the third quarter. The one thing that is encouraging, though, is he still was targeted 8 times and has received 15 targets over his last 2 weeks. Mechie is probably a wide receiver 5, but does offer some wide receiver 3 upside with this type of target volume. Mechie, much like AD Mitchell, gets a very favorable rest of season schedule, making Mechie at least worth an ad in 12-team leagues and above. And then Dontavian Wicks. Now, Wicks had a monster day on Thanksgiving, catching 6 of 7 targets for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns for 28 fantasy points. He is currently the wide receiver 2 on the week. The issue with Wicks, though, I think is pretty much volatility. Over the last 4 weeks, he has seen 8, 2, 4, and 7 targets. Despite the strong performance, I don't think you'll ever trust playing him, especially with Jaden Reed's return looming. All right, let's go ahead and move over to tight ends. First up, we're going to talk about the same guy we talk about every week, it seems like, but Britton Strange, only roster in 32% of leagues. Strange, once again, had a very productive day, albeit on just 4 targets. He secured 3 of them for 45 yards and a score for 12 PPR points. He has now scored 13 and 12 PPR points in back-to-back weeks. The Jags did need to throw the ball at a very high rate today, but considering the state of the tight end position, Strange should be rostered way more than 32% of leagues. Next up is going to be Colston Loveland. Loveland caught just 3 of 6 targets for 28 yards against the Eagles on Black Friday. This obviously was not a great outing, but I will say the Eagles have been very good against tight ends all year. The encouraging part is that he's seen 5 or more targets in 4 of his last 5 games. The ultra-talented rookie tight end will get a better matchup in Week 14 against the Packers, who will have the 15th most fantasy points to tight end. So Loveland, if he's sitting out there, definitely worth a look. Next up is going to be Darren Waller. Waller, a return today against the Saints. He was targeted 3 times. He hauled in 2 of them for 47 yards. Obviously, nothing sexy, but we should expect for him to continue to get more involved in this offense. And the Dolphins get some incredible matchups for tight ends moving forward. In Week 14, he gets the Jets, who will have the 16th most PPR points. But during the fantasy playoff, it is pure sex with matchups against the Steelers, who have the 4th most PPR points. And then in Week 16, he gets the Bengals, who have been horrendous against tight ends all year. Waller is a priority ad for anyone needing a tight end help. Now, lastly, I just want to talk about Harold Fannin. Fannin caught 3 of 5 targets, for 43 yards and a score for 13 PPR points. Most of the damage came on his 34-yard touchdown. Fannin led all pass catchers and targets. Since Sanders has taken over, he's been targeted 11 times. Next up will be a true matchup of mediocrity with a home matchup against the Titans. Fannin will be a high-end tight end 2 for me. And then lastly, Isaiah Likely. Likely had a very good day, catching 5 of 6 targets for 95 yards, 15 PPR points. No, it could have been a monster day, but he fumbled the ball just before he crossed the goal line, which ended up being a touchback because it went into the end zone, out of the back of the end zone. But this was a touchdown that was taken off the board. Likely is still splitting routes with Mark Andrews, but the next 3 weeks, likely we'll see incredible matchups against the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Patriots. All 3 ranked inside the top 10 in fantasy points allowed to tight end. So Isaiah Likely is also definitely a way you could look when it comes to tight ends. So check some of the comments here. RJ Harvey, yes. It was a good day for RJ Harvey. It was looking a little sketchy there for a little bit, but that game was absolutely phenomenal. The Commanders and Broncos game. I mean, incredible game. Only problem with some of the officiating in that game was absolutely horrendous. The NFL has to do something about some of the stuff that's going on here with officiating right now in the NFL. I mean, it almost ruined that into that game, but Mariota, just kept willing him back, and they ended up scoring, regardless of that. But and it was the right move to go for the 2-point conversion. But some of these calls, like the intentional grounding, was not intentional grounding, and then the other call before that. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous. I think it was the illegal movement or whatever it was, but it was just horrendous. Would you pick up Strange and drop Schultz? Also have Warren. Yeah, I'm totally cool with doing that. I would rather have Strange, I think, than Schultz. I mean, this matchup against Kansas City at times has struggled against tight ends, but for the most part this year, they have done a very good job against opposing tight ends. So I would rather play Strange over Schultz this week. I'm hoarding Ferguson, Strange, Fan, to block teams from having them. Also hoarding Brissett, Dart, JD5. I need to win next week and hope for some matchups to break my way. I dropped 167. Love to hear that. It was a gross day for the most part today in like fantasy points, stuff like that. Like there wasn't a lot of fantasy goodness. I mean, if you had JSN, you weren't really happy, which is a rare bad day for him. Actually, this is probably his first game all year where I would say he had like a down game. So, and it really couldn't have come at a worse spot for that. But it was just a lot of really gross. I mean, Josh Allen didn't really do anything. I mean, a lot of the studs. I mean, Jonathan Taylor was like fine, but I wouldn't say it was great. So I should have said something about this. Looking at Tesla, AD, Valet, maybe claim. So I think Amon-Ra St. Brown plays on Thursday. It came out that it's a low ankle sprain. If you know anything about Amon-Ra, that dude is tough as nails. Like he will play through anything. And now that it's not a high ankle sprain, I would be actually shocked if Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't play on Thursday. So I know a lot of people are going to be excited about Tesla, but I don't think there's a scenario where Amon-Ra doesn't play. Like the Lions are getting to this point now where they really need to start ripping off wins. He's going to have an entire week off because they played on Thursday. So, but again, I would be shocked if Amon-Ra didn't play. It sounds like it was very minor in nature. They got the MRI, just a low ankle sprain. I think he tapes it up, and I think he plays. Like I really would be shocked if he doesn't play on Thursday. I need to drop a quarterback: T. Law, Daniel Jones, or Brock Purdy. I mean, Brock Purdy's going on bye, but I probably would just drop Daniel Jones, honestly, at this point. Like, and you could just play Trevor Lawrence this week in this matchup that they're going to have. But I just don't know. Like, Daniel Jones obviously is dealing with his fractured fibula. And so, like, that is something to definitely, like, it's definitely affected him. Now, I'll say it was a terrible matchup for him this week against the Texans. I mean, the Texas defense, like I've said all year, has been phenomenal, has been excellent. Um, but you probably drop Daniel Jones. Like, I don't think he offers much of rushing upside anymore. I don't think they're going to be asking him to do that. I think they're going to do their damnedest to try to hide Daniel Jones at this point and not ask him to throw the ball a ton. So I would probably be okay with just dropping Daniel Jones at this point. So that being said, looks like the last question we got in here. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't a crazy, in terms of waiver ads or anything like that, or needing to do anything like that. So I guess that's a positive because we didn't have a ton of injuries today. I have Pat Bryant and Burden, but I'll probably play Ferguson and Strange in the flex, and hopefully Marks and Neal aren't trash. Yeah, it's tough with Marks. I mean, they're playing the Chiefs. Chiefs' run defense has actually been incredible this year. So you would want him to get heavily involved in the passing game, but so yeah, that's going to be the tough part with that one. If you know kickers, Fairbairn or Jason Myers for playoffs. Uh, I really like both of them. Let me see something. I can look real quick. Let me see which one has a better schedule. So where are they at? Okay, so Kyrie Fairbairn. Actually, they're both pretty much middle of the road in terms of the rest of the season schedule for kickers. Yeah, they're like both like right in the middle in terms of the rest of the season schedule. I honestly like depending on if you can, I might just play matchups. But if I had to choose, I would probably go Jason Myers. I mean, Jason Myers has been awesome this year. I mean, so is Fairbairn. Like I think they're both really close. But I probably lean Jason Myers just because of the offense. I'm going against Stone. I think an 87-point lead will hold against Bay. Booty stack. Yeah. I think you're good to go. Good luck on the win this week. So that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. We'll be back again Tuesday morning. We'll have our top kickers and defenses of the week for week 14. So we'll be back again, and then we'll be back our normal schedule with everything else we do. But I appreciate it. Appreciate all the support. And we will see you on the next one. Bye.